Welcome back to the Night Gambit TV. Today, we are diving into a high-octane battle from the WR Rapid Miami 2026, round 4.4. We have American Grandmaster Leinier Dominguez Perez playing white against the rising Uzbek superstar, Grandmaster Javokhir Sindarov, playing black. Host, let's jump straight into the board. Let's go to the part 1 moves 1 to 5. 1. E4. White opens with the king's pawn, taking immediate control of the center squares d5 and f5. 1. e5. Black responds in kind, occupying e5 and challenging control over the central territory. 2. In f3. White develops the king's knight to f3, simultaneously attacking black's pawn on e5. 2. In c6. Black develops the queen's knight to c6, defending the e5 pawn cleanly. 3. bc4. White brings out the king's bishop to c4, setting up the famous Italian game and targeting black's vulnerable f7 pawn. 3. In f6, Sindarov selects the two knights defense, immediately putting pressure on white's undefended e4 pawn. 4. d3. White plays d3, solidifying the center pawn structure and transitioning into the quiet, positional Giuoco Pianissimo, the very quiet game. 4. bc5. Black places the king's bishop on c5, mirroring white's setup and aiming at white's weak f2 square. 5. White castles kingside, securing the king behind a wall of pawns and bringing the king's rook closer to active duty. Part 2. Mid-game positioning and tension, moves 5 to 10. With the opening phase settled, both grandmasters begin maneuvering their forces for key positional advantages. 5. d6. Black solidifies the central pawn chain, giving the light-squared bishop on c8 open diagonals to enter the game. 6. c3. White prepares a flexible pawn center, preparing for potential d4 pushes while creating an escape square on c2 for the light-squared bishop. 6. a5. A energetic, modern dynamic move. Black expands on the queenside, grabbing space and threatening to trap white's bishop with a potential a4 push. 7. 1 rupee. White places the king's rook on the central e1 file, reinforcing the e4 pawn and anticipating open lines later. 7. bb6. Black preemptively tucks the king's bishop away safely on b6, avoiding any future tactical hits on c5. 8. nbd2. White develops the queen's knight to d2, planning a classic Italian maneuver, transferring the knight via f1 to g3 or e3. 8. Sindarov completes kingside castling, ensuring king safety before launching middle game operations. 9. h3. White plays a crucial prophylactic move, denying black's minor pieces access to the g4 square. 9. h6. Black mirrors this strategy, controlling g5 to keep white's pieces out of black's territory. 10. In f1. White continues the standard knight tour toward the kingside attack vector. 10. b6. Black challenges white's strong light-squared bishop directly, offering a trade to neutralize white's diagonal control. Part 3. The kingside storm and piece exchanges, moves 11 to 18. Now, the game sharpens significantly. Sindarov begins aggressively pushing forward on the king's side. 11. bb5. White declines an immediate exchange on e6, sliding the king's bishop back to pins black's knight on c6. 11. n7. Black reroutes the queen's knight toward g6, aiming to reinforce the kingside complex. 12. a4. White preserves the light-squared bishop, maintaining tension along the a4, e8 diagonal. 12. ing6. Black's knight reaches its destination square, locking down f4 and h4. 13. ing3. White completes the knight rerouting to g3. Both sides now have knights posted on powerful g-file squares. 13. nh7. Sindarov unlocks his king's rook and queen, freeing up the f-pawn and preparing an aggressive kingside push. 14. d4. Dominguez takes action in the center, striking open the diagonal and directly challenging black's e5 pawn. 14. ing5. Black's king's knight leaps forward to g5, forcing white to make a decision in a tense tactical sector. 15. nxg5. White accepts the challenge, taking black's knight on g5 with his own king's knight. 15. hxg5. Black retakes with the pawn, opening up lines for future attacking avenues on the h-file. 16. bb3. White returns the light-squared bishop to b3, placing pressure on the e6 and f7 squares. 16 in f4. A magnificent outpost. Black places the knight on f4, creating an uncomfortable wedge in white's kingside position. 17. b6. White eliminates black's light-squared bishop to simplify the position. 17. fex6. Black recaptures with the f-pawn, unlocking the entire semi-open f-file for black's king's rook. 18. b3. White develops the dark-squared bishop to e3 to block incoming pressure on the d4 pawn and clear space. 18. qf6. Black aligns the queen on the f-file, creating a scary battery with the rook targeting the f2 pawn. Part 4. Tactical explosion and central breakthrough. Moves 19 to 26. Sindarov ramps up the pressure. Notice how every black piece is coordinated directly toward white's king. 19. In f1. White brings the knight back to f1 to aid in defense and cover key entry points. 19. qg6. The black queen shifts to g6, putting double pressure on white's undefended e4 pawn. 20. f3. White fortifies e4 with a pawn push, but this weakens the diagonal and creates permanent dark square weaknesses. 20 d5. A decisive strike in the center. Black rips open the position, challenging white's central pawn foundation. 21. dex5. White takes the offered pawn on d5, attempting to relieve the central pressure. 21. dex4. Black captures back immediately, dismantling white's pawn structure. 22. bxb6. White exchanges his dark-squared bishop for black's active light-squared bishop on b6. 22. x3. Tactical brilliance. Sindarov ignores the immediate retake on b6 for a second, pushing the pawn directly into white's defense. 23. qxf3. White's queen takes the dangerous f3 pawn to keep control of the king's defense. 23. cxb6. Black captures back the bishop on b6, securing an open c-file and a strong structural grip. 24. qe4. White offers a queen trade to neutralize black's terrifying attack. 24. c4. Black accepts the exchange. With a superior piece setup and activity, the endgame is completely winning for black. 25. rex4. White retakes with the rook, occupying e4. 25. rad8. Black seizes the open d-file with the queen's rook, controlling the entry points into white's camp. 26. a4. White tries to create counterplay on the queen side. 26. rd5. Black's rook doubles down on central dominance, threatening to scoop up the weak e5 pawn. Part 5. The final infiltration and black's victory. Moves 27 to 33. We enter the final phase where Sindarov's active pieces completely paralyze white's forces. 27. b4. White pushes queenside pawns to deny black's rook access to c5. 27. rd3. Penetration on the third rank. The black rook targets the weak c3 pawn. 28. b takes a5, then black replies with b takes a5. A pawn exchange on the queen side leaves both sides with isolated queenside pawns, but black's pieces remain vastly superior. 29. c4. White pushes the pawn out of danger to c4. Then black replies with 29. Rook b3. 30. kh2. White moves the king off the back rank to avoid tactical back rank tricks. 30. rb3. Black's rook targets the weak b4 pawn while keeping maximum board control. 31. n3. White attempts to activate the knight via e3. 31. re2. Absolute pin. Black's rook pins white's knight against the rook on e4. 32. rg1. White desperately attempts to defend his back rank and piece coordination. 32. nd3. The knight hops forward with devastating effect, threatening deadly forks on f2 and e5. 33. c5. A last-ditch effort by white to distract black, but it's far too late. 33. in f2. Boom. The decisive blow. The black knight strikes f2, simultaneously attacking white's rook on e4 and threatening inescapable tactical destruction. And in this completely lost position, Leinier Dominguez Perez resigned. Javokhir Sindarov delivers an absolute masterclass in active piece play and central control at the Rapid Miami 2026. What an incredible game by Sindarov. That knight maneuver in the endgame was pure perfection. Which move was your favorite? Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep move-by-move analysis, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the Knight Gambit TV, and turn on notifications so you never miss another Grandmaster breakdown. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video. God bless everyone.